tonight the topic is energy, monitor, analyze, and control. I understand how important monitoring is because I drive Prius. Until I started driving Prius, I think I may still be, but I was a very a reckless driver. But now I'm monitoring. There is a panel that shows how I'm conserving the energy, so I'm driving a lot more carefully than I used to. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator tonight. It is my honor and my privilege to do so. The moderator tonight is Eric Wessoff. He's a senior analyst of GreenTech Media. I asked him, why did you start this? How did he get into this GreenTech? He said he was just, getting tired of doing something that's not good for the earth. So he self-educated about green technology. Back then, there wasn't a word green tech, but he self-educated and he started his own company. And on his personal side, he is a yoga teacher and he rides horses. So everybody, please join me to welcome Eric Wessoff.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. What a crowd. I didn't realize this is such a high-end, highly attended event. I work for a company called GreenTech Media. This is supposed to be a very hot mic, so I'm supposed to stay away from it until you get to your booth. I can't. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Please tip your waitress. Okay. I do that at every event I ever chair, so if you've seen me before, you've heard that. When I was enlisted to speak at this event, Liz Crowell called me, and she said, we want you to speak on energy efficiency, and for some reason, I heard smart grid, and she talked about monitor and analyze, and I just heard, how you talk, a dog doesn't, all a dog hears is walk, 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 right, and blah, 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 blah. And I just heard smart grid, smart grid, smart grid. So I put together a 800-slide smart grid presentation, and I gave it to Liz, and she rejected it, saying that this is on energy efficiency. So this is how I've modified the presentation. That's not true. But so it's a number of slides. A lot of it is reference material. So if there's a way that you want to, if we're going to post this, or it's downloadable, there's a lot of stuff on here I'm going to skip. It's a lot of good information, but you can read it on your own in your ample spare time. So while Liz was saying energy efficiency, I was thinking smart grid, and the smart grid is a lot like this metaphor, and the smart grid looks like a lot of things to a lot of people. I was hearing vehicle to grid and high voltage DC and energy storage, and this program is about energy efficiency. So anytime I need it to be, please drag me back to energy efficiency. We have some really smart, hopefully entertaining panelists, and you'll hear from them in a little while. I go on for about another 8 minutes. GreenTech Media. I work for GreenTech Media. I helped found GreenTech Media. I have a great job. I get to speak to CEOs, scientists, politicians, policymakers every day, and I get to write about them. And I do this all day, every day, and I end up, dare I say it, somewhat like a venture capitalist. I have very wide amount of information, very shallow amount of information. So I could talk. He's on. I could talk for an hour on fuel cells, but the second hour is going to be a little sketchy. And this is, I was warned not to show this, but GreenTech Media, because you can't read it, but this is a great map of the smart grid. It's downloadable from our site, and if you ever want to learn a little bit about the structure of the smart grid, it's a great layered idea of how to learn about the smart grid, and it does include energy efficiency. Some myths about the smart grid. The smart grid is not about smart meters, and it's probably not about home area networks. It's a lot more than that, but we're going to be mostly talking about the residential consumer-facing smart grid tonight. And I'm going to fly through a lot of this stuff, but what the smart grid can enable is cleaner, more efficient, more distributed power generation. today's energy mix, the red, again, I'm sorry about the pie charts and the eye charts, but the red is, the top one is this year. The red is our electricity usage. This is from EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute. 51% of our electricity comes from coal, and 21% of our energy comes from nuclear power. EPRI predicts that in 2030, 52% of our energy is going to come from coal, and 29% of our, so 52% of our energy is going to come from coal, 13% of it is going to be through advanced coal with carbon capture and sequestration. That's what CCS, that's using a technology that has not yet been invented. And nuclear is going to be 29% of our energy mix with a financing structure that has not yet been invented. But, so I'm able to give a broad view, really a 30,000-foot view of what we want to talk about. What these gentlemen and what we're working on in green tech and the smart grid is trying to get rid of coal, trying to get rid of, well, nuclear, green or not? Green. All right. It's an interesting question. We cover nuclear because it's in operation, it's non-carbon, but obviously has a lot more stories than that. Nobody has to talk about what the problems are with oil today, and this is a pissed-off bird from Alaska, but it serves as proxy for pissed-off birds in the Gulf of Mexico. This is beautiful downtown, I don't know if my pronunciation is good, but Linfen, China, at noon on a sunny day. And it's equivalent to smoking 52 cigarettes a day. So it's good if you're a cigarette smoker, but not great if you're a kid. So this is one of the things we're really trying to address, that even though there's a lot of greed and avarice and people are trying to make money in green tech, the far-reaching goals are somewhat noble. And of course, if you believe in anthropogenic global warming, we have a problem there as well. So one version of the smart grid is this. And there are other variations of that. So a simple definition is, what is the smart grid? The smart grid will emerge from the integration of the electrical grid and the communications grid. And I don't want to read these slides to you, so I'm just going to do some yoga and place the harmonica. I'm going to keep going. But a lot of things fall under the smart grid umbrella. Demand response, energy efficiency, which we're going to be talking about tonight, but smart buildings, V2G, which is vehicle to grid, home area networks, modernized transmission and distribution, energy storage, all of these can be fall under that rubric. And in fact, all of these have a piece of energy efficiency in them. We're going to specifically talk about the customer-facing aspect of it, but realize that when you talk about smart grid, you're talking about that elephant and all those parts of that elephant. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're very much in uncharted territory. This really hasn't been done before with the technology we have. And even though we're moving at 100 miles an hour into uncharted territory, we're doing it with $3.4 billion in our pocket, and we don't know where we're going. So it should be an interesting ride. Another thing to remember is that whenever you're dealing with energy, you're dealing with policy. If you turn to page 3 of your syllabus, I always wanted to say that. There's a fun fact in there. An 18 cubic foot, you're actually listening, I really like that too. An 18 cubic foot refrigerator consumed approximately 2,000 kilowatt hours in 1970. Now, a high quality refrigerator of similar size consumes only 390 kilowatts per year. Why is that? Art Rosenfeld, that's right. It's policy. So those refrigerators didn't get magically better. They got better because of energy, of Homestar and Art Rosenfeld and an edict to get better efficiency. So whenever you're talking about energy, are we doing okay? Did I say the word energy efficiency enough? We're doing all right? All right. Whenever you see the word energy, you really have to think about pricing, financing, technology, and the third stool is certainly going to be policy. So I think that's important. And I was asked to speak a little bit about venture capital. So I have to monitor every green tech deal that ever happens. And I track these and I add them up and I parse them and I fold them in 100 different ways. And I don't know if you can read it, but in 2008, approximately $7.5 billion of venture capital money went into the broad category of green tech in 350 deals. In 2009, the total was about $5 billion. More deals, less money. And in 2010, that number is probably going to be close to that $7.5 billion value in far, far, far more deals. So a lot more deals. None of the, if you're familiar with green tech, there are a lot of $300 million solar factory build-out deals. Those are probably not going to, well, there are still aberrations like Better Place got $350 million, and Solyndra, whatever. But I think we're going to see a lot more smaller deals. Would that make sense? Yes? Okay. And if you'd like this presentation, you can see the details of all. What I did is I put in the presentation all of the 2009 energy efficiency, demand response, and smart grid deals. And again, you'll see that they go everywhere from cooling systems to software platforms for distributed energy, demand response, and again, I'm not going to ask you to read this stuff, but if you'd like this, it's a good listing, and you can have that. I go into each of these categories in detail in the presentation, but I'm only going to talk about this slide, and I'm going to skip through it. But we've determined what the top 5 smart grid trends are, and one of the things that utilities are terrible at is dealing with the consumer. And they rolled out some smart grid. They rolled out some smart meters recently. Not some, 10,000 a day is what they rolled out. And they sent a basic little note to their customer base saying, we're going to be coming by to install some smart meters in your house. They didn't tell their consumers what these were about and how it would change their lives. They just put them in there. Because utilities don't think of the customer as the customer. They think of the California Energy Commission as their customer and not the actual person who's paying the bill. Oh, I'm starting to rant. Oh, by the way, I will be live blogging and Twittering from this event. So if I'm busy, don't bother me because I'm writing. Anyway, it's important that utilities change the way they do business in order to get the smart grid, energy efficiency, and the consumer involved. And that's going to happen. And I think, so if I have a theme, it's 1, the smart grid and energy efficiency can get us off of coal, and 2, utility infrastructure is going to change, or there's going to be new types of utilities coming online. There's going to be a new character to utilities, and the old school utilities may not be able to keep up. I'll skip to number 3, EV growth accelerating the need for smart grids. Most people know, if you go to a smart grid conference, you know that a typical EV draws as much power as a large house. And except it's driving all over the place, and utilities don't know where those large houses are. A gentleman from EPRI said that every day is going to look like the 4th of July because transformers are going to be blowing up all over the California region. So that's an interesting fact. And EPRI stopped letting him speak after he said that, actually. And the other thing I'd like to talk about is that there's a convergence going on of solar and the smart grid. There are some circuits already in the utility regions that are 20% solar. And solar looks like, hang on, so blah, 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 blah. Solar looks like this. Nothing gives a utility more heartache than something that looks like this for a utility. And wind looks like this. And so utilities are going to have to make some changes in terms of storage and many other aspects. So I will wrap it up because I'm running out of time. So I did want to talk about this. I'm a journalist, and every day I am pitched by a home area network energy dashboard company, startup with anywhere from 0 to 6 people, who has the next thing that they want to put in your home so that you can monitor energy data. And they're coming at it from all different directions. They're coming at it, obviously, they want to make it look like an Apple product. It's true, and they want to create a value that makes it look like an iPod or an iPhone. It's absolutely, but the thing is, we want our music in our hands. We don't really want to know how many kilowatt hours our pool heater is using. when we're not home. And that's the challenge that some of our startups, who you're going to hear from, if they're still talking to me, when you come up. All right, so I think I will finish it up because my time is totally running out. But another thing is about the smart grid is that the big names in industry are coming into it. You've heard of these guys. There's others, like if we're talking about software, there's Oracle, there's SAP. There's also in hardware, there's Siemens, ABB, are all moving into the smart grid. And a lot of skill sets that Silicon Valley people have, electrical engineers, software engineers, all transfer into smart grid. So there's a lot of employment opportunities there as well. I can talk about, tomorrow night at the Palo Alto Research Center, I'm speaking for an hour with a smart panel on energy storage. You can go there tomorrow night. It starts at 7 o'clock. I didn't intend on making that a plug for my event, but that's what it was. And so, again, when you're talking about the smart grid, we're going to be addressing little tiny pieces of it tonight, but realize that it's a much more, it's a rubric that covers many, many, many little sectors, and it looks like a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And again, so that point, the smart grid is a variety of different things. The smart grid can actually prevent us from building more coal plants, and utilities are going to be changing the structure over the next 10 years. This is my email. If the presentation is not available on the VLab website, you can contact me, and I can send you a link where you can download it. Thank you. That's it. Tip to clap. All right, so I get to introduce John Steinberg. He's the CEO of EcoFactor. I'm not going to read you his biography because it's on page 2 of your syllabus. And he's going to talk for about 15 minutes, and he has a presentation loaded up here. And after him, we're going to get the rest of the panel assembled, and we'll interrogate them soon. Okay.
All right, thanks, Eric. I was still talking to you until you got to the part where you said, tomorrow you're going to be with a smart panel. So as an entrepreneur, it's my job to differentiate, and I'm going to differentiate 2 ways from Eric's talk. One is I'm actually going to talk about what I was asked to talk about. And the other is I don't think you'll find me anywhere near as funny as Eric is. So I'll talk a little bit about what we do, but I should say that what I was asked to do was to assume that there were lots of entrepreneurs in the audience and that people would be interested in stories and things that would be valuable to somebody who was trying to start a business, trying to get funded, et cetera. So from that perspective, although obviously I've talked about what we do a few times, happy to do it, I think from the perspective of somebody looking to start a company, me talking about what we do would be a little bit like last week's lottery winner telling you the winning numbers that he picked. And that's not because there's luck involved, because of course, as everybody knows, luck is only a factor prior to funding. Once you've actually achieved funding, that was all about skill and excellence and all of those things. But I think the analogy holds for a couple of reasons. One is, although real data is kind of hard to come by, the sort of anecdotal numbers I've seen suggest that sort of taken as a whole, the odds of getting venture funding should remind you of the odds of winning the lottery. It's tough. I think the other reason that it's important, that the analogy fits, is that what worked for me won't work for you. In a sense, it's even worse than the lottery, because if you think of VC money as being in a combination safe, I crack it, I open the safe, and they'll change the combination on the lock. You won't be able to raise money doing what we do. So I'll talk a little bit about why we do what we do. But I think largely there's the same problem. It may give you some insight into sort of how we figured out this wonderful fundable idea, but I don't think that's teachable, frankly. If it were, there would be people out there making lots of money teaching you how to come up with fundable ideas. what there are out there are lots of people who have figured out not how to figure out the good idea, but how to separate wheat from chaff and decide what's not a fundable idea. And some of them are here in this room. They're called venture capitalists. And so what I'm going to talk about, at least to start, is in effect how we moved from what was not really a fundable idea to an idea that actually did get funding. And I'm hoping that there'll be something instructive for entrepreneurs out there in that experience. So in order to do that, I have to start by showing some of the slides that we used when we first went out onto Sand Hill Road. This is back in April, May of 2007. And I'm not going to talk to the substance of these slides, except to say that if your slides have this many words on them, you're not going to get funded. If your slides talk about paradoxes, you're not going to get funded. But we did identify sort of an interesting problem here, which is that there was and is a real chasm between what people say about green and about the environment and what they actually do. And we thought initially that we figured out an answer to that paradox, which was that what people were looking for was better information, personalized information. And so how we positioned ourselves initially was as a source of better information to allow people to make better decisions. And the way we went about that was sort of a Web 2.0 kind of approach. We were going to mash up data from a bunch of different sources and give people really personalized answers, not just what's generally a good idea, but what's a good idea for you in your home, et cetera. And we had a beautiful website with lots of fancy Ajax-y things, and it was beautiful, and we didn't get a whole lot of traction. And just to give you a sense of sort of how time passes through all this, the slides that I just showed you, every time we did a new deck, we numbered it. And this was deck number 10. So we went out to Sand Hill Road. We started pitching this. We weren't really getting very far. As we're working on this, we continued to refine and learn. And we learned something really interesting as we were sort of going out telling that story. The first thing that helped us change direction that we learned was as we got smarter about how energy is used in the home, we realized something that we thought was very significant, which is you see a lot of products, you hear a lot of people talking about the ways that you can deal with vampire loads from your television staying on and things like that. And it turns out that all of that together, everything in your house that's not a thermostat, that's not controlled by a thermostat, uses about the same energy as goes through that one little box on your wall. And so the insight was, wow, if we can just do something about heating and air conditioning just with that one box, that's a great pressure point. We could do something interesting there. And sort of the second half of that was, okay, now if you apply that sort of mashup Web 2.0 kind of thought process to the problem of understanding and managing the way energy gets used through your thermostat and start throwing other pieces of information at that problem, analyzing them, you can actually get some very, very interesting insight about the energy use in one home versus another home and help people save substantial amounts of money, easily hundreds of dollars a year. Then we got, and while we're doing this, we're continuing to pitch sort of business model one on Sand Hill Road. And then we reached, I think, an even more significant insight about the path we were on and what we could do. And that is that what we had started out doing was, the question we were answering is, how do we package information such that people will care? How do we package the information such that people will make their actions match their stated beliefs? How do we get people to do something different? And our initial approach that we knew wasn't going to get anywhere, we had sort of discarded this even before we started out on Sand Hill Road, was just throw data at them. And we realized that wasn't going to get us anywhere. And so the place where we started back in 2007 was that if we could abstract from that, if we could analyze that data and come up with what we were calling knowledge, something useful, actionable, out of that data that we could get people to move. But the insight that we came to as we were out there selling business model number one was that for a significant percentage of the population, that's asking for behavior modification, and people don't like behavior modification. We're not going to be able to, in effect, lead people who aren't already interested in this stuff into changing their behavior. And what that insight plus what we had seen about the thermostat made us realize is that if we could automate that process, if we could take all of the things that we were learning from the thermostat, from the internet, and optimize for people in the background automatically, do for them what they would do if they had degrees in thermodynamics and facilities management, that we could save them huge amounts of energy without them having to do anything, without them having to modify their behavior. And just to give you a little bit better flavor, because I promised I would talk a little bit about what we do, what we're doing is we're collecting tens of thousands of points of data from each connected home every day, from the thermostat, from weather services on the internet, and in essence, we're watching the relationship between inside temperature, outside temperature, the cycling of the HVAC system, and by looking at those things together, we understand the unique thermal characteristics of each home that we're connected to. We're able to use that information to optimize a cooling strategy or a heating strategy on a house-by-house, hour-by-hour basis, and save people significant sums of money, again, without them having to do anything. And I'm telling the story a little out of order here, but we went out and we deployed this, we tested it. It saves people substantial amounts of money. It works. So now let me go back to the story of how we changed course. So we're out there still, we're learning about this new thing and getting more and more excited about it. At the same time that we're walking around Sand Hill Road telling the old story, because this new story is really incomplete at this point. And then we start to get some traction. We met with a couple of name brand VC firms, generated some interest, got some partner meetings scheduled, and then realized that we liked the new business model a whole lot better than the old business model. So now we're having these internal conversations. Okay, what are we going to go tell these guys when we go back and talk to this partner meeting? At this stage, we are a pre-funding company. Nobody's drawing salaries. People are getting antsy. Everyone wants to get money and get going. And we have a story that we've fallen out of love with that's reasonably well developed, and a story we've fallen in love with that's half-formed at this point. What do you do? We actually talked with one of the junior folks at the main VC that we were talking with and said, you know, here's our problem. What do you recommend we do? And she very smartly said, we're looking for focus here. You're talking about two businesses now. Two is not better than one. Two is worse than one. And so we had to face a choice about what we were going to do. And to make the story short, we wound up deciding that we just could not, we couldn't go in and say we still believed in the story we didn't believe in anymore. So we told the two business story, we crashed and burned. And then spent roughly the next 2 years refining the story, getting the proof points, delivering on business deals, and then finally getting funded in this past December. So in terms of, I think, what the object lessons are out of all this, we did sort of a dangerous thing here. We had a thesis about how the world works, and we got rid of it. We essentially changed our product. We changed everything about what we were doing from sort of that narrow focus. But we kept some important things, and things that still, I think, differentiate us from the vast majority, if not all, of the other players in the space. There are a few other folks who are like us, who are focused on the customer, on the consumer, on the homeowner, rather than on the utility. It's sort of interesting to us to watch. An awful lot of people have been much more focused on delivering what utilities want. And what we see when we look at them is that it's difficult, if you focused on the utility proposition, to then show a compelling value proposition for the consumer. But if you start with a compelling value proposition for the consumer, there's all kinds of things there that are going to be interesting to a utility. We retained the emphasis on analytics. We're still mashing up vast quantities of data. We're still about algorithms and automated optimization. It still has a very strong sort of Web 2.0 flavor because we're using, in essence, we're using data that we're gathering from our users in order to deliver value in the service. But I think the most important thing that sort of saw us through all this, and in terms of trying to pass on something that maybe entrepreneurs wouldn't have heard from other people in other places, I think the most important thing that really, that I learned that we had as we went through this process was about how we reacted to the word no. People who got into Stanford Business School, my guess is most of them didn't hear no very often. This isn't a safe school for most of you, I'm assuming. How you handle no, I think, is in many ways one of the most important questions about how you sort of negotiate your way through this process. I mean, there's sort of three possible alternatives. You can fold, and VCs don't much like that because it's very common for a VC to fund a company. The company realizes that all of their initial assumptions about their business were wrong, and in midstream they have to course correct and come up with something different. And so they're looking for persistence and that sort of thing. Another kind of response, which I've seen plenty of, is, well, they just didn't get it. They're wrong, I'm right, we don't have to change anything, we just keep banging our head into the wall some more. That doesn't work either. I think the entrepreneur's response to no is about acknowledging, somehow balancing the acknowledgement that we need to do it better if we're going to get to the end point here, with a refusal to take no for an answer, in a sense. It's not arguing with the person who's telling you no, because the feedback that you get if you're polite about asking is invaluable, but it's about believing that if you keep pounding at it, you'll eventually get there. And so, again, just to give you a sense of how long it was from deck 10 to here, this is a sort of summary slide of what we do. From the deck that, more or less the deck that got us funded. That was deck 10 that I started with. This was from deck 117. And there were like 90A, 90B, 90C, a lot of those along the way as well. To wrap up, obviously I'm very happy to be where I am. This is a great thing to be doing. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to do this, but this takes something out of you. This is there's a lot that goes into making this happen. So that's what I had, and I didn't check the time.
So we'll bring the rest of the panel. We'll bring guys. Come on up. Coming up. John, are there and Dharmesh, are there do-overs? Are there do-overs? He pitched you once. Yes. He pitched you with his first stupid idea on deck 10, and he says, "Hey, I got deck 117. You'll love it." Do you ever? Does that happen a lot, or they really have one shot to say their piece?
With good guys like us, it happens all
So, yeah. Okay.
No, it's very common.
It's common that
very
somebody.
Very common to get a first pitch, give feedback, go back and refine the model to work with them.
And you'll take that second meeting, or it's you're somewhat recalcitrant about doing that. What's your feel?
My experience is that we did get a few second bites at the apple, but what the advice I would give to somebody starting on this process is to treat VCs as consumables. Once you go and pitch somebody, you're not going to get a second shot unless something material has changed. And there's something they liked the first time. Getting a second bite at the apple is not a sure thing. In most cases, that was very difficult or impossible.
I think the only point I'll make, and this might be applicable for all the entrepreneurs in fundraising mode, I think it's important when you start looking at VCs and partners, if you will, in the process, if you look at a subsection of the industry, they're all operations guys who've been through the same shoes you're in now, and realize that you don't always get the business plan perfect and right the first time around. They will help you and work with you along the way. The other part of the VC business may not, but I think we tend to work with companies, and I generally say our percentage close deals to the first time we see a company and we close the deal is probably less than 25%. Work with them, come back, and then we fund them.
Okay. Housekeeping, you have yellow cards. If you have questions for the smart people on this panel, the very smart, very extremely smart people on this panel, please fill them out and we'll collect them and shred them. We'll make it up as we go along. John, thank you. That was great. That was a great tale. And you also, you didn't mention that you were involved with the California Clean Tech Open. Did you leave that out on purpose?
Oh, did I not mention that we won the California
They won the California Clean Tech Open. Which is, never mind. Okay, so.
But if you want repeatable advice, that's actually a pretty good thing to do, I think, to get funded. You have to figure out how to get there, but.
John, that was deck number 109 at Clean Tech Open? Or was it?
All right, so
9 slides.
So the structure tonight is somewhat, puts Daniel Yates in a somewhat unenviable position because he's following John Steinberg, and he has to now tell you about his company and differentiate it from what EcoFactor does. So his biography's here, read it, because that's not what you need to talk about. I want to hear about Opower, and you can tell a little bit about your startup tale. You don't have the benefit of PowerPoints. And what you do and how it's a little bit different than what John does.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I was telling John I'm excited to be sitting next to him because there are few companies in our space where I actually feel like philosophically we have the same mental model for what works with consumers in energy efficiency. And I'll speak to that in just 1 second. So what Opower is, we've been in business for about 3 years. I'm fortunate to say we've been quite successful so far. We're about a 100-person company now. We're on track for about $35 million in revenue at the end of this year.
Say that again? Say that again? How much?
35 million.
Wow.
And we're selling in the utility space. So we provide information services to consumers, but we do it through utility partners. And so the philosophy piece, we think there's 2 things that have really been missed when you look at the products and services that have been brought out so far in energy efficiency and in energy information management. So first order of business, energy efficiency is super boring. No one cares about it. None of you here actually, you're here because you care about it, but you're probably not doing much about it. Energy information is actually accessible and has been accessible to all of us for 50 years. And let me just do a quick test. So how many of you checked your email today? Raise your hands. Okay, so you like information. How many of you checked your stock quotes in the last month? Okay. Now, you care about it, you think energy information is interesting, you have a meter outside of your house that you can read whenever you want, just like you can get your mail. How many of you have read your meter in the last 3 months? Oh my God. That is by a factor of 10.
That's because they all have smart meters, and they all know that they don't work.
That's right. So imagine if only 1/10 of you had raised your hand. Because my point is exactly this, that energy information is boring, and there really are 2 things that are important to be able to actually engage customers with energy information. And it's first, you have to push the information because nobody's going to pull it. And the second thing is that you have to deliver outcomes to people, not just raw data. So that's what I think is so interesting about and so similar between EcoFactor and Opower. And if you look at what the industry has delivered so far, it's been web portals and in-home displays. And fundamentally, for slightly different reasons, they both suffer both of those problems. You have to pull them, either have to go to the web or you have to go buy something in the store, and then they just deliver you raw data. And that's why they aren't really delivering value. So what we do, and this is what's quite differentiated from EcoFactor, is we have actually cracked the nut at motivating behavior change. So we partner with utilities. Now, John has cracked the nut with his users and motivated perhaps much larger savings per capita than we have. So I'm not saying it's two different approaches. But here's what we do. So we work with the utilities, and we suck in all of their energy data, their meter data, their billing data, whether it's smart meter, 15-minute, hourly, or daily data, or conventional monthly data. We match that with weather data, localized weather data streams, demographic data, housing data, GIS data. We run a bunch of analytics to understand and profile customers. And then we have expertise, in addition to software, in behavioral science and in targeted marketing. And we reach out to customers. And we get them informed about their usage, and we get them to make meaningful changes. So we're driving now across millions of homes across the country between a 1.5% and 3.5% reduction in consumption. And for an individual consumer, it's not a huge difference. But by the end of this year, we'll actually be providing as much energy savings as the equivalent of 1/3 of the entire solar industry. So it's a big deal. And utilities pay us for it because they have energy efficiency mandates. So they're being forced by the regulatory commissions to drive down consumption. And they're looking for a whole host of ways to do it. And we actually become a very low-cost and easy way for them to implement their programs. So to put some specifics on it, just to give you, what are these products? So we reach out to customers in the mail. We relaunch web portals, but more importantly, we drive email campaigns for utilities. We do text alerts. We power the customer service center. If you get a mailer from us, and if all things go well in the next couple of years, many of you will, you'll see your energy use compared to your neighbors, your closest neighbors in similar-sized homes. You'll see disaggregation analytics that show you the breakdown of your cooling and your heating and your baseload usage without putting any devices in your house, just using smart meter data. And comparing you again to what's normal. And then you'll get targeted recommendations, from tips to actual coupons and discounts that help you save energy and take action to reduce your usage. So that's what we're up to. I think it's different but similar, and
no, it's different. But so you've saved 1.5% to 2% on that bill, and or you've saved 1.5% to 2% energy. You said it's 1/3 of the entire global solar industry, which is U.S. solar industry. That's a lot smaller than the global solar industry.
Hey, what have you done this week?
What? What did you say?
I said, what have you done this week?
Watch out.
Can you play the harmonica?
No, I'm in the midst of getting rid of this gig and founding a company. But the value that you've provided is certainly for the utility. Now it's war, right? Between me and you. It's for the utility, but the consumer, you've saved me a donut. You've saved me a cup of coffee. And my dealings with the utility today are that I open the utility bill once a month. You want me to get a lot more involved with this process?
No, I don't. I want you to spend like 5 seconds a month thinking about it, sharing it with your spouse, and whoever is the one that uses more, get an argument briefly, and then have that adjust the thermostat, and have it maybe get you to buy CFLs, and then have one in about 50 people go out and get a efficient air conditioner or efficient refrigerator.
So you are dealing with irrational things, right? You're dealing with consumers and people, right?
And importantly, though, it's free, right? So right now, you have a utility bill, you have a utility relationship, or a limited one, and you get almost nothing. With us, you haven't paid anything. It's actually a net benefit to the group,
and
now you have all this cool
There's the Prius effect that you can ride, right? Okay.
And you get,
Okay. Let's just keep it a little more. Let's keep the antagonism going. So I've had Opower on a few panels, and I always cite this study, and you can tear it apart, but it's worth citing. There was a UCLA study that. No, that's not the funny part. There was a UCLA study. Sorry, and maybe that's enough to discredit it, they claimed that when you gave Democrats and environmentalists indications of how much energy they were using, they were virtuous, and they lowered their thermostat. And when you gave Republicans information about their energy bill, they actually started turning the air conditioner up and leaving the doors open.
Yeah, so there's sort of three important things to say on that. First, the study was conducted by a devout liberal.
Whoa.
So who I'll just leave it at
no,
that.
that makes okay.
Secondly, that's the joking part. The two real facts are that it was conducted in Sacramento. It was done a study on one of our earliest programs, our first program actually, and the data was there were many cells, and where there were sort of different conclusions that could be plucked, and that was sort of the most potent, convenient conclusion. Okay. The other fact, though, which is sort of the thing that really puts the nail in the coffin on that front, I mean, it doesn't, I say this because I think it's important for people to know that this is an apolitical factor. Our business would thrive if we only targeted, liberals. And in fact, I could actually make more money because I could specifically pick them out first, and I could get a lower cost per kilowatt hour. So this is why I'm not doing this. Is
make that third point. I'm ready for that. I'm ready
one of our most impactful programs is in Minnesota, in Michelle Bachmann's district. And for those of you who are into politics, you know that district is not composed of Democrats.
It's a Republican district of crazy.
Yeah, and they have some of the highest results in terms of energy reduction.
Okay, I'm sorry to put you on your heels. Would it be a bad time for me to ask you to sponsor our next?
Not at all.
I also wanted to ask John one quick question. You said you were focusing really on that 49% piece of heating and cooling. Are you moving to lighting and the other stuff, or you really stay focused on that stuff?
I think there is a long-term play for more of the devices inside the home. We're starting with the thermostat because it's a single, inexpensive device. We're very focused on return on investment for the homeowner from day one. And our view of that is that the thermostat is in essence, the only single device in the house that's going to pay for itself. Once the infrastructure is in place to connect the thermostat to either a gateway or to the router, to the grid, adding additional devices can be cost effective.
Okay. All right. We're okay? You and me? All right. Let's move along to the next round. Dharmesh Thakur he's the vice president of ATV. His bio's in here. Tell us about ATV a little bit, and tell us about your investment thesis on smart grid broadly and your energy efficiency. Energy efficiency practice.
Right.
Please.
Yeah, so I'll leave the marketing stuff out, but ATV invests actively in IT, healthcare, clean tech. I'm a software guy, and I spent the last 10 years of my life in software, SaaS companies, and so I look at a number of companies at the intersection of software, enabling energy efficiency. And in that context, our investment thesis has primarily focused on ROI-driven businesses. So I couldn't agree more with everything that Eric said, which is there's a lot of money to be made in the residential segment. There's 150, 200 billion, pick the source, you've got different numbers, but $200 billion in energy consumption, residential houses. But if somebody told me, go to Best Buy, spend $500 to install this system, then spend 5 minutes of your time every day, so that at the end of the month, after spending an hour and a half, 2 hours, you save $10 a month. Tough argument to make. Very tough argument to make. And I agree with the Prius effect and all that, but I'll tell you, I was in a Tesla this morning. I was at another panel. And I can see why 1,200 people have bought Tesla. People aren't buying $120,000 cars just so they can save $300 a year in fuel costs. They're buying it because it goes 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds. And everybody in your neighborhood, I mean, heck, I'm on University Avenue. I always notice a Tesla when it drives around, right? So I think the residential market is huge, but I'm not sure that it's driven mostly by energy savings alone. And so, in looking at Opower site, and I'm not surprised you get the results, because I would think that people are driven to change their behavior and be more efficient because they want to be better than their neighbors. Is that a fair assumption? Because you send them data about their usage relative to their neighbors. And so that's a better driver, I think. You want to be more efficient. You want to see that you're doing your part of the, you're doing your part of cleaning up the environment relative to the neighbors, if you will. So coming back to our investment thesis, I like the market size behind residential energy efficiency. I like the fact that these are big businesses. I worry that utilities are the ones who gain a lot more than residential customers do, and that the average engineer in Silicon Valley probably makes $150,000 a year, doesn't really care to spend too much time on saving $100 a year, even though they want to be green. So, comfort and conservation are often at odds, if you will, and that has prohibited mass energy efficiency in the residential sector, in my opinion. Having said that, I'm always on the lookout for opportunities where companies have a novel idea of tying energy efficiency to something that people care about. So if you got a contest going and you started giving people social recognition on their Facebook pages for being more efficient relative to their neighbors, perhaps, bringing kind of what Opower is doing online, I would bet you there's a significant number of people who would be interested in that. Because they want to be green, but they're more interested in getting the social recognition and getting incentives that people really care about. So if you guys, anybody has an idea about tying what people care about and driving them to be energy efficient, definitely come talk to me.
We tried to figure out what that value, how can we just make it instead of a cup of coffee and a donut? What if you took that $10 and put it into a charitable bank account, or put it into a college bank account, or it went to some altruistic trademark? That's trademark. That's trademark. Model, you can't steal. But I mean, there are possible other ways of trying to create some value with that, right?
That's right.
Dharmesh, tell us about a little bit about some of the companies you have invested in energy. If not, so you've looked at half a dozen, 20 home area network and residential companies?
More, yeah.
More. And you've made how many investments?
None, for the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
So having said that, that's what we don't like to invest in. What we do like to invest in is in companies that have a real ROI-driven sales. So if you talk about commercial lighting control, so you talk about data center HVAC efficiency, you're talking about a facilities manager who has their bonus tied to saving energy. I talked to a major telco portfolio manager, real estate. Their power bills per year are $1 billion. Per building, they're consuming about $4.5 million in power every year. And for them, saving 10 to 15% by controlling their lights, controlling their HVAC is meaningful. And so, these guys are very motivated to buy solutions, have a faster sales cycle, and in many cases, it's accelerated further by subsidies you may have. So, those sectors where there's a real ROI-driven sale, which could be sweetened by subsidies or utilities giving you some rebates or what have you, are ones we focus on.
So lighting controls is
lighting controls,
for commercial industrial applications.
Commercial, industrial, data centers, anything that's an energy hog, and generally it's lighting, HVAC, in commercial and industrial customer sites. That's what we've been focused on.
Okay. And do you have any imminent investments you might be making in the next month in the smart grid area?
Energy efficiency, yes.
Energy efficiency. Yes? So there's something to be coming on, and do you want to reveal it here tonight?
We're not sponsoring you anymore.
The Twitter feed, the Twitter feed, the Twitter feed. All right, we'll come back to you. David C., right? The H on the beginning and the H on the end are silent. He told me that. So David C. is the Vice President of Marketing of Emerging Technologies at Cisco. Why the heck is Cisco on this panel?
I figured you needed like a token big company. We were the closest one.
And HP couldn't
So
because they were conflicted.
please tell us about your. Please tell us about the energy practice and where it fits into Cisco.
Yeah, so it's a good question because a lot of people say, what's Cisco doing with energy? But I work for one of the sort of four major divisions of Cisco that's focused on creating internal startups as a part of our overall innovation strategy. So we do sort of an interesting thing. We try to build startups that are business units inside the company. It's sort of an internal version of venture capital. And we look for very large market opportunities because we are about a $40 billion a year company. And so, to have a meaningful impact on $40 billion a year means, you have to be able to build big businesses. So we look for businesses that we think can become billion-dollar revenue businesses for Cisco within a 5 to 7 year period. And one of the areas that we've made a number of investments in and created a number of internal businesses is around energy. So we have sort of four areas that we're looking at and working on. One is in the smart grid area, and that's working with utilities around, kind of combining the communications network and the electrical grid. We have a very active business around commercial buildings and basically creating what we would call smart connected buildings. So take a facility like this and make it smart enough to know how many people are in the room. So, what does your air conditioning need to be and how much lighting do you need and which elevator banks you need to power on or power off, and helping businesses improve their energy efficiency. We have a new business area around home energy. So your slide with those kind of groovy looking home energy controllers, I'll get you a picture of a Cisco designed Apple-like home energy controller. Put on your slide, but we're very interested in the opportunities around home energy efficiency. And then we're also very interested in IT energy efficiency. So how do we improve the energy efficiency of data centers, and how do we use the network to control the power consumption of any device connected to the network? So for example, you're in your office and you go out of your office and you probably have an LCD screen. You might have a terrific Cisco phone with an LCD panel on it. You might have, you might have a LCD picture frame. You might have a bunch of lights, et cetera. You might have other things in your office that consume power. When you walk out, those things all stay powered on. And if you're not in your office, your phone doesn't need to be powered, your LCD doesn't need to be turned on, your picture frame doesn't need to be on, et cetera. So we can use the power of the network and connect it with sensors and things like that to improve the energy efficiency of any type of electrical device in your office or wherever else it is. So we have a bunch of startup businesses. These are all sort of early businesses for Cisco, and but it's an area that we think has tremendous potential, and it fits well with what Cisco has historically done well, which is around connectivity and around kind of converging different types of devices onto the network, and in helping to use standards to help improve connectivity. And for most of you that are looking at this space, that today we have a kind of a confusing hodgepodge of pseudo standards, potential protocols, et cetera, to connect all of these different devices and allow them to communicate. And hopefully Cisco can help provide certain sort of normalization across all of these devices, so that software companies can read your meter or read the devices in your home or read the devices in your business, et cetera, a little bit more simply than they're able to today. And that, we hope, will unleash lots of other innovation that maybe some of you in the audience will be able to build on top of and create great businesses that will take advantage of some of the infrastructure that we provide.
Thank you. So Cisco is one of the stalwarts of Silicon Valley. It's innovative, it's acquisitive, it's fast-moving, it makes money, it grows fast, it has a entrepreneurial spirit, and it's introducing new, interesting products all the time. And then there's utilities. So how do you slow down your metronome to your clock speed to match your impedance with utilities?
That's a great question, but you'd be surprised. There are a lot of utilities that are actively investing and actively experimenting, and while this is a little bit new to them, and they're obviously trying to understand how the technology world is going to affect their their core business. At the same time, they're driven by a combination of economics and regulatory mandates and policy to look at ways to improve energy efficiency, and so that helps right, businesses like Nan's over there. So we work with utilities. It is a little bit it can be a little bit counterculture. I mean kind of utility guys and tech guys when they get in the same room are a little bit of a struggle from time to time, but they're definitely coming together out of necessity, and to some extent, again, regulatory mandates and policy.
So Dharmesh, when a company comes to you and says our customers are the utilities, as a VC you say no? What do you say?
No. So I think I think some companies have certainly done a much better job than others. I mean, I was talking to Daniel before this, and I asked him, so how long did it take you to get the first utility customer? Because, $35 million is a sizable amount, and I'm sure that would take a long time and a number of customers, residential customers, to make that kind of revenues. But utilities, on the other hand, have the luxury of doing nothing. And so when you deal with these customers who have the option of doing nothing and still making a decent amount of profit along the way, how do you motivate these guys to act quickly, and why? So, when I look at startups, I see a lot of companies that get pilots going with utilities, and that doesn't really mean a whole lot because the utility might do a pilot with 3 other companies and at the end test them all and say, well, when we're looking at a real project with DOE money 3 years down the line, we'll call you. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So digging into that and saying, why is this an important aspect of the utility strategy today, and why would they want to deal with it today, is key. And I will say I have been surprised in talking to a number of progressive utilities, PG&E being one, if I may, where it's interesting, where PG&E's perspective was, we make money whether we sell electricity or we save electricity. The key is we need to be able to attribute the energy savings to us. So if I rolled out a $500 home area network or fancy console made by Cisco, looks like Apple, I roll it out to my home, how do I attribute that every resulting energy saving is driven by the utility? So I can see some cases, perhaps like Opower, where you're sending this as a part of your utility bill and you can directly attribute it to them, where I can see why the utility is motivated because they're making money as soon as they send these bills out. And so their goals align with you, but in most cases it's not.
So there's actually a kind of a question from the audience that's about the exact same thing, and I see you're bubbling up something, but just it says utilities and PUCs are really good at demos and trials. How do you transition them significant adoption of new technologies and services? In other words, how do you stay out of demo trial hell forever and just while they draw down all of your VC funding?
Yeah, so I mean, pilots, well, so first, they shouldn't be drawing down all your VC funding because you should be getting paid for the pilots, because the utilities do have huge, so the great thing about the utility industry, and this is sort of one piece of repeatable advice on starting a company, is go into a huge market. And utility industry is an enormous, enormous market. So that's the reason why people get stuck in this pilot hell, is because the industry has so much money that they can afford to blow $250,000 here, $500,000 there, just to test things out, and nobody even looks twice. So to get out of pilot mode, because you can get these $500,000 pilots forever, or for a very long time, you have to have a very clearly articulated value proposition that is delivering something that is concrete and goes right at the heart of something that the utility industry endemically cares about. They're not about being green. They're about the relationship between the utility and the utility commission and the utility commission's priorities. And so if you have a very clear, measurable, and this industry rejects anything that is not directly measurable, value proposition, then you can play the utility commission off of the utility, and that's the other piece that I think too many tech companies miss, is thinking that their customer is only the utility. The customer is not only the utility, it's the utility plus the utility commission and that relationship. And if you can bring to them a value proposition that works for both, then you do have something. I will say one other thing, which is to speak to the metronome. I thought that was actually very apt. We have a lot of, now we are selling to many utilities at once, and we can relax a little bit and afford to have something go a little bit slower. But we actually have a mantra now on our sales team, which is don't be the spaz at the party. Because we have this vision that the utility guys are all sitting around like, hey, bro, what's going on, man? And you're the guy like, can I get you some chips? Do you have enough to drink? Everything okay? And they're like, whoa, dude, it's just a party, man. And that, you have to go to a lot of parties with that high metronome to actually get anything done. So,
let's contrast that with what John had. I mean, John, you have a very meaningful impact on energy efficiency. 10 to 15% on a home would be meaningful. Why did you guys go down the utility route? Did you go down the utility route? And
that was deck 12.
We started out focused primarily on utilities because, the Willie Sutton rule, it's where the money is. Excuse me, but realized through painful experience exactly what you guys have been talking about, that the terminology I've used, similar to what you said, Eric, impedance mismatch is just such a radical difference. But you know, if it's different for Cisco and PG&E, think about what it's like for four pre-funding guys in Cisco. We decided very quickly. Well, not quickly. We decided after banging our heads against that wall a few times that it would make sense for us to explore other opportunities. And in fact, because we're focused on the consumer value proposition, and as you said, there's something that an individual consumer hopefully can get excited about, saving hundreds of dollars a year without having to do anything. We're pursuing alternative channels, and back to all the time you spent talking about the smart grid. We think of the world as divided up into two smart grids. There's the utility-owned smart grid, and that's what's already being rolled out and spending lots of money and pissing people off. And then there's the consumer smart grid, and that's the part that in effect, well, David's working on both, but Cisco also will be a player in the consumer smart grid as we are, and in a sense as Dan is. And I think that creates the opportunities to go after consumers in lots of other ways that don't depend on utilities.
You know, there's one other point, which is the closer you are to the utilities' core business, the more risk averse they get, right? Because they worry about security, right? They worry about scalability and reliability because they get measured on outages. So, you know, if you have a great technology and, you know, it blows the power in 1,000 homes, that they care about that. They care a lot about it. And so I think, you know, you'll see the closer you are to their core, the more they will do trials, and the slower it'll be and harder for startups because you'll have the burden of no history around reliability and scalability and security and all these sort of boring attributes that actually utilities care about. And that's why I think, you know, there will be a lot of opportunities for over-the-top plays like yours.
And I think it's really important to keep in mind, I mean, one of the more fashionable pastimes at events like these is utility bashing. But keeping the lights on, that's an important job. And by and large, they do it pretty well. And yeah, what we do theoretically could mess with that. And I want them to be very focused on making sure the lights stay on. Yep. And that should have an impedance mismatch with what we do.
Okay, so let's. We got a lot of questions from the audience. So this is the lightning round. Dharmesh,
6.
Which subsectors of smart grid of energy efficiency are overinvested?
AMI.
AMI, advanced meter infrastructure, right?
That's
okay.
right. So.
Okay. Next, so the question is, where does the USA rank compared to China? And he wants you to rank it 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we're not going to take that question. I want to ask you, are you doing any business outside of the United States? Are you looking at, or do you have a European sales office expansion planned? Is something that you're looking at?
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. I'm going to be going out. I'm going to Europe in August.
Okay. And my understanding is that Europeans actually care about like saving money and the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried that they actually have already been doing it.
Yeah, so, there's less to slice off.
The electricity rates are probably 2 or 3 times what we pay here as well, right? So.
That's true. That's true. John, are you U.S. bound?
No, not long term, certainly.
Okay.
Initially, we're trying to stay at home, but we are getting lots of interest from outside.
Okay. David, or do you sell just U.S. or do you sell?
No, we're working globally. And, you know, somebody told me the other day, they said, if you...
it's for the energy application.
Yeah, no. We're doing that too. But, somebody told me that, if you want to know what to do in the next kind of 2 or 3 years, go to Europe. And if you want to know what to do in the next decade, go to, like, Korea. Mm-hmm. And so,
if you want to overinvest in smart meters, come to the United States.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's a lot of innovation in this area outside the United States that is not to be ignored or dismissed by any stretch. And there's a lot more energy sensitivity outside the United States than there is inside the United States. So it's certainly, I think, a very fertile area to look for good ideas. And those markets do work. They work very differently than they do in the U.S.
Dharmesh, do you consider, or are you U.S. focused solely, or do you look at European deals, Asian deals?
I'm focused primarily in the U.S., but I've looked at a number of opportunities in India and China, and I just don't think there's the amount of innovation we see here. But we do recommend our portfolio companies to go look for those markets.
Okay. Wait, hang on. I have a phone call. I got to take this. I'll be right there. This happens about every time I'm on a panel. So I just got a text from Barack Obama. He's fired Steve Chu. Don't Twitter that.
world we live in.
It's just our secret. He's fired Steve Chu. Steve was involved with a little bit of a scandal, sex and drugs scandal. It's the quiet ones you have to watch. And John, you've just been promoted to Secretary of DOE. This is your press conference. What policy changes need to be made in order for your company to do better?
We need to do something about the conflict of interest rules, for one thing, since I'm the CEO of a startup.
It's in a blind trust.
No, thank you.
Your investors will love that.
To be honest, we're trying not to go down that rabbit hole of getting enlarged in sort of broad brush policy issues. Obviously, from our perspective, there's so much that's achievable with efficiency, with what we've all been talking about here. And I didn't do the math, but my guess is replacing all of that oil that's bubbling up in the Gulf right now is something that maybe you've already accomplished, but certainly together we could accomplish very easily in terms of energy that never needed to be used in the first place. And so I think there's a real political problem with the vested interests in pushing away from efficiency, because it's not just consumers who don't get excited about it. All the folks who have the big influence in this area.
All right. Well, judging by the speech, you have a political tin ear, and you're fired.
My turn?
Daniel, you're hired.
I want to thank Matt Kahn at UCLA.
I've had people actually take. They've been waiting for the. They have like an acceptance speech in their pocket.
Yeah, for us, it's a very so the self-serving answer is, which is not just self-serving, is our business thrives on energy efficiency resource standards. So we would love to see energy efficiency resource standards rolled out across the country. Personally, I'd also love
like a renewable portfolio.
Yes, let me explain what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are two common regulatory structures that are in place at the state level. One is decoupling, which is where the utility commission structures the way the utilities make money so that they're no longer compensated by the volume of electricity they sell, and they just so they don't care if they're no longer disincentivized to drive down usage. That's one regulation. The other one is that the utility commission just says, all right, guys, you got a 2% goal. Get 2% of your energy through energy efficiency every year. Go, and if you don't, we'll penalize you, and if you do, we'll reward you. That's actually the regulation that has been hugely impactful. It's literally 100%, I think. Maybe one exception of our deals are in states with energy efficiency resource standards. It's growing very quickly, but I'd love to see that at the federal level.
All right. Judging by that party anecdote you told us, it's clear you've inhaled at some point in your life. So you don't get to keep this job either.
The new inhale is snorting, from what I can gather, right?
So, but you did say decouple, right? Isn't that what you were kind of talking about? Is decouple energy?
So that's actually not that's important, but it turns out to not be. I jumped into this industry as a total outsider, very focused on decoupling, thinking that's the thing we need. We need to align interests with a decoupling mechanism. But the reality is the utility industry is it's just a political relationship between the commission and the utility. If the commission just sits down with the utility and says, look, I want you to get efficiency, the utility will do it.
Gets done.
That's the number one thing, just to say, here's what I want.
All right, but so it goes back to one of the few relevant slides I had is policy's pretty damn important, right? Yeah. Okay.
That was a great slide.
Anyway, you've got to go spend more time with your family.
Thanks, Daniel, for all the great work.
I don't like your chances, Dharmesh, just so you know.
Third time's a charm, so thanks again, Dan, for all the great work you've done for the last 2 minutes in office. Let me give, look, I'm not a political guy, but I'll tell you, I'm Steve Chu. Chill out, dude, it's just a party. I'll tell you.
Now.
The first thing I'm going to do is stop screwing around and jerking around with companies, making them waiting for what is supposed to be ARPA money and grant money, and give it out, get our act together, because if we don't, China's taking our part of the game.
All right. Well,
There you go.
that's not gonna fly.
Like I said, I'm new to politics.
Okay. David, it's not. It doesn't look good, but give it a shot.
I'm so glad I'm last. I might get to keep this job. I two thoughts. So one is I think the government could accelerate innovation by promoting standards and looking at how to drive certain standardization around the grid and energy and measurement and connectivity. There's lots and lots of questions around how does data get from the devices in your home to a meter to and through the grid to consumers, et cetera. And I think the government could play a huge role in helping to create the standards that will open the door for lots of innovation in the same way that the internet, created a connectivity standard that
Mr. Secretary, so one of the questions from the audience was how bad is the standards logjam and how will it get resolved? And we're all happy. Now, you know what, you're all rehired. It's a quadrumvirate of folks on the panel. Are you encountering a logjam of standards? Is that a problem that you see?
Oh, sure, because there's big money at stake, right? I mean, for the guys who end up on the right side of the standards battle, they get a time to market advantage, right, and potentially a technology advantage. So it's fairly politicized, and there are some legitimate technical concerns. So it's something that I think will get played out, and frankly, standards take a long time, as you all know, and so there's also a great opportunity to use consumer action to drive default standards. So you'll be able to vote with your wallets around some of these things.
Dharmesh, do you see Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth?
Well, now that I'm sitting right next to the Cisco guy, I was going to say this IP should be the global standard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right,
we appreciate that.
No, but seriously, I think that's an issue. You come across a number of Silicon Valley guys who say, well, billing control systems, lighting controls, this should just be IP. It's the most secure protocol out there. That's the way it's got to be. And yet you're dealing with facilities guys who, in my experience, every facility guy I've talked to happens to be named Joe. But every time you talk to Joe, he tells you his career has been built with dealing with BACnet and Honeywell and all these systems.
Yeah.
And how do you bridge with these systems and have a phased approach to integrate with these systems and then slowly work their way up to a better standard, perhaps. But in the interim, in the next 5 years, a lot of these legacy protocols are here to stay. And the faster you adopt it, the better off you are as a startup.
Okay, I want to keep going. We have about 5 more minutes. Is that right? We stop at 8:30 sharp? So let's ask a few more questions. It says here, behavior modification is hard. You talked about that, right? Games are fun. The Prius HUD teaches
So glad you said that, because I own a Prius, and it's like driving a video game. You're always trying to optimize. Can I get to 53 miles per gallon, right?
So, I mean, there's another home area network company called Tendril. The CEO is a guy named Adrian Tuck, and he said he spent far, far more hours behind one-way glass observing humans dealing with a variety of screens and behavior just looking at displays and how he would modify it to try to figure out how to get into their head. Are you being too serious? You're being that spaz at the party? Do you need to lighten up? Or is there a way to better engage the customer, or you're a straight shooter in that? I mean, are you going to play with? Can my electric bill be fun?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
But I think games is definitely something that we've been thinking about as a possibility.
I think from our perspective, the answer is maybe it can be fun for a month, and then it can be tolerable for a month. We got a great term from one of our advisors that I repeat all the time, quasi-engineering term, MTKD, mean time to kitchen drawer.
Yep.
You love it the first month and you tolerate it the second month, and it just ends up in the back of the kitchen drawer after that.
Can we ever be non-nuclear, carbon-neutral society? Come on, that's not that relevant for this conversation. Covered that. No. The answer's no. Comment below chart. There must have some graphic PDF here that I can't see. But if residential consumes only 29% of the U.S. energy, where does the other 71% go? Charging the Teslas. Where does the other 71% go?
It's non-residential.
Please. They say there are no stupid questions.
I can say it's split about 30. It's split about a third industrial, large commercial, industrial, commercial, residential. that at least cuts the unknown part of the pie in half.
Well, okay, so this builds on that. Isn't a larger percentage of energy consumed by businesses, manufacturers, and the grid? It wasn't a stupid question. How will consumer savings make a dent in energy efficiency? I mean, it's still an enormous piece of the pie. I answered the question, I guess.
Yeah, that's it.
Next question. Liz had no idea what she was getting into when she hired me tonight.
Did we get to the question where you asked about
Wait a second, you got
Opower's
hired?
hiring?
Oh, you didn't get an honorarium. It's a nonprofit. What was the
The
question?
question about Opower's hiring in San Francisco.
Opower is hiring, by the way. So
I'll answer that question.
okay, is Opower hiring?
Yeah, Opower is. We just opened an office here in San Francisco. We're looking to staff up to about 50 people, primarily product development, software engineers, program managers, product managers, QA, et cetera. So we are a really fun place to work. We're very double bottom line. We've actually made hard decisions as a company to do things that are only oriented around driving down emissions. So we're very committed both to the environment and to making a fast-growing company.
Rather than get swarmed at the end of this panel, what would be a way of with some decorum that people could actually apply?
First, swarm me. And then secondly, check out our website. We have about 50 job openings. We're headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. So don't let that confuse you. We have essentially an unlimited number of openings here in the Bay Area.
Unlimited?
Yes.
Wow.
Wow.
If you all
Ask in an
want,
hour.
You're all hired.
We're hiring, but we're not
so
unlimited.
that's
If you've
8:30.
been working on a home area energy management system selling to the utility, get real, just go work for Opower.
Give us
I didn't
a
say that.
couple of closing words, where your company's going this year, blessings for the audience, some type of closing words.
Peace be with you.
Okay, namaste. Sir?
closing words. This was a lot of fun.